Welcome, folks, to The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Every week, diving deep into the truth of Catholic social teaching and restoring all things in Christ. The Uncommon Good, live from Iowa Catholic Radio's Mercy Live Up Studios.
The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner.
I'm Dr. Bud Marr.
We are coming to you from America! USA, bud. USA. Join me. USA.
USA.
Okay.
Ooh, yeah.
Today is July 4th, the birth of our of the United States. Did they teach you that in schools, bud? I don't know what Nebraska was doing in the 80s.
We start with Nebraska history, but we eventually moved to the colonies.
Yeah, well, that's great. No, wonderful to come to you. July 4th, I hope you guys are all enjoying your day out there. I think you can already start launching fireworks, but in Iowa, it's legal to own fireworks, but maybe not legal to shoot them off in many cities. But I can tell you, my car has physical evidence that people shoot off fireworks because people have shot off fireworks from the trunk of my car. So if you're out there listening today, folks, have a safe day. Have a wonderful day. Please stop shooting fireworks off of my Honda Civic. What's it? Good one, Jeff. What's the fireworks situation up in Pittsburgh?
You know, I haven't done the old internet search yet, but I think they're illegal in Pittsburgh because I'm seeing these commercials now about, like, crossing the state line to get to the fireworks.
Right.
And I'll tell you, man, it feels eerily silent here because in Des Moines, they're not messing around.
No.
They love this great country.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a war zone here in Pittsburgh. It does not feel like the 4th of July to me.
Yeah, in Oklahoma, they're not worrying about the rules. You think you need to give old Betsy Ross an M80 to show that you're proud of where you are, Okies are going to do it. So, but everybody, keep all your fingers. Maybe drink after you've shot off the fireworks, but enjoy your day off, America. You deserve it. Like I said, Bo Bonner, director of the Zeta Institute for Foundations in Ethics and Leadership, and the director of Mission and Ministry at Mercy College here in Des Moines, joining you from the Iowa Catholic Radio's Mercy Live Up Studios. Looking forward to having a good 4th of July show with you today. Bud, what's been going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, I'm at the National Institute for Newman Studies here in Pittsburgh, and I wish I could give our listeners a visual image because, you know, with our goal of getting me to sound better on the radio,
right.
I invested in a Snowball Black Ice microphone.
Right, which is the name of a 90s album of someone, I'm sure.
You know those memes that are like, here's what you think you're doing and here's what you're actually doing?
Yes.
Like in my studio, I'm like, I am harnessing the genius of technology. And there's like, you know, like flashes coming from my fingers. And then we tried to start the show and things just melted down. So I'm back on the telephone for now.
Yeah.
But when Snowball Black Ice 2.0 comes out, I'm going to ask for it for Christmas.
You'll be there. Well, Bud, you want to know what? You want to know who uses technology and doesn't mess it up? The underwriters of our show. That's right. Cartridge World, they don't need no Snow Black Icicle 5 or whatever you were talking about. They just make good printing cartridges. So if you need to print out stuff, for instance, Happy 4th of July, all you need to do is go to Cartridge World, underwriting our show.
I mean, in all seriousness, when you think about a place like that's going to supply some of your printing, what you want is reliability, and I think Cartridge World provides that in a way that apparently the Snowball Black Ice does not. So I encourage you to visit them in Windsor Heights, 801 73rd Street, or by phone, 515-564-7400.
That's right. And, as always, we are underwritten by Mercy College of Health Sciences. We just got done with midterms. I don't know about your students, Bud, but pretty proud of mine. They did a good job. If you want to be a part of Mercy College, of course, we start back up in fall. We're in the middle of things now, but there's no wait list. You can do RN to BSN, Healthcare Administration, and Health Information Management online. We also have the Accelerated BSN program, where if you have previous BA experience, you can get done in 12 months. We were supposed to have the president on last week. He got sick, but we are getting ready to reschedule him, so we'll have him again on soon. So, yeah, how are you feeling about midterms, buddy?
No, I think my students are doing pretty well. You know, in the online context, it's probably a little harder to to give direction. But the great thing about Mercy is there's a lot of flexibility with your schedule and your course options. So that was a good reminder that there's different ways to skin that cat, so to speak.
Wonderful. Well, on today's show, we have, I'm going to call her a local legend. So, just make sure to get the expectations as high as possible in the studios today, so we don't need to use, blue tangerine microphone technology. She's just here. Dr. Karen Zwier, PhD. So here's the weird connection, bud. She got it out at Pittsburgh, History and Philosophy of Science. She's held appointments at Drake, ISU. It seems like the universe decided that if we were going to get her here, you had to go off to Pittsburgh. So it's the old academic switcheroo. We are going to talk about science and faith and how this all goes together and what science is. Because I don't know about you, but half the time people on the internet are talking about science. They talk about it like it's a something you buy in bulk, right? You're like, well, I got my lentils and I got my Irish cut steel oats, and then I got my science. It was on sale at Fresh Time or whatnot. And so we're going to try to dispel some of that.
Well, I was reading one of these, like the New Atheist, and I won't name him, but he said something like, I can't live in a world where we use telephones and still believe in God, and it seemed like a confusion of both worlds. So, Bo, this was a conversation that does come up quite a bit with students, but I think a lot of times, I would say both sides of the divide are operating with caricatures of the other side, so this should be a great conversation.
All I can imagine is it's like, there's like some it's like, it's a Feast of St. Thomas here around now, so it's like St. Thomas is out in India, and he's talking about God, and someone has like a dish, and they just open the dish, and there's a phone on it, and everyone's like, never mind, St. Thomas. There's a phone over here. How could we be so dumb? And you're like, oh, wow, we have a lot to work with. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. Stick around. When we get back here in a bit with The Uncommon Good, we will be talking with Dr. Karen Zwier. Hang out. So, Bud... we're doing fireworks for our break sound today, of course, because it's 4th of July.
Yeah.
But I do want to point out that on the Zip Whip line, 515-223-1150, we have people who have pointed out that they think either they liked the kitten, but this is someone from Northwest Montana, a faithful podcast listener, so we want to appreciate that. They're voting for the kitten. Someone else voted for a pig because Iowa is the top pork producer, so we're going to have to do a pig oink at some point. Today, like we said, fireworks because of 4th of July, but if you have anything else you want to say, 515-223-1150, the Zip Whip line. Hashtag UCG. Just ask us for questions, and we would love to get a chance to answer you. And like I said, it doesn't have to be live, so if you're listening to this later, just when you do 515-223-1150, the Zip Whip line, hashtag UCG, and we will answer your questions. This is The Uncommon Good. We will be back after these messages. Back with The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. In studios today, we have Dr. Karen Zwier, Ph.D. from University of Pitt in History and Philosophy of Science, held appointments at Drake and ISU, and like I've been throwing out, legend around these parts, so glad to finally have you on air. How are you doing, Karen?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Well, we are looking forward to getting to talk about this today, and like I said, when we bring up the idea, the specter of science, it's hard to get an honest sort of beat on the conversation, because so many people they want to say that there's a very tangible way that science has improved our life, but then faith they want to say either is invisible, it's failed them before. They talk about both as if they're sort of a technique. I even had a nephew that we were talking to, and he said that he wanted to go get a job in science, and I held back my tongue from saying I don't think science is hiring. I don't think science has an HR department, right? What I often see happening is I think people say that about science, and what they mean is technology, and they kind of mean it both ways. They like, Bud before the break was saying, someone's like, I can't believe you can believe in God and you have a phone, but that seems to not only misunderstand God, but misunderstand what we mean by science. So you, history and philosophy of science, deeply steeped in all of these things. I don't know, what's the way forward to have to have a conversation that actually makes sense about science and ultimately the relationship of faith and science?
Science is a big word, and so often we use it in this way with this capital S, right? Because science. There's this sense that it's this. It's used as another way of naming a body of knowledge, as if that body of knowledge is 100% certain, locked down, not changing. And once you think a little bit, even a little bit, also in academic circles, we do this professionally, about what that implies, it all kind of starts to fall apart. It's pretty complicated to get to the root of this question of what is science.
Karen, it seems to me like this sharp divide in our culture wasn't always there. Do you have some sense of the what are some of the historical reasons why you slowly saw this sort of like tension arise in some people's minds between science and faith?
You know, I think there's always been some tension there. I don't think it's a new thing. Historically, I mean, I actually teach a course on science and religion, and historically, I think there are many different episodes in which the two have come into conflict. And I would never be one to promote some kind of pretty harmony picture where everything's simple and easy. I think that's definitely too simplistic. So I don't consider this to be a problem of the contemporary era. In fact, I find great comfort in the thought that we, like others of the past, have difficulties in trying to figure out how to reconcile our Christian faith and bring it into a common picture with the rest of our knowledge. For the early Christians, it was a question of how to bring their faith into some kind of conversation with Greek thought. For the medievals, it was the question of how to bring their Christian faith into conversation with this new guy named Aristotle who had been rediscovered through the Muslim world. For us, it comes in this context of how to integrate our faith into the knowledge that we gain from modern science. And I do think there's something particular about that context, but it's not a new thing. Yep. And I think it's helpful to remember that.
Well, I think that, one of the things we have to do to separate this out is science, there's the sort of benefits of science, right? So, like, we wear the benefits of science. We're using it right now. We're talking to Bud, even though he may as well be a ghost in a different world. The robots do a lot. And so people automatically think, like, robots, technology, science. And that's not, in many ways, that's already complicated throughout the years. Sometimes it's just people actually tinkering with stuff that makes technological advancement. But even within science, and I think this starts to be the interesting thing to talk about for the show, it's not like science is this unified body of anything. And then when you get down to it, it's not only that there's multiple disciplines, biology, physicists, I'm sure there's jokes about those two not getting along, but even within those fields, now there's all these still live huge fights about what their basis is. And then science itself, if we're talking about the terms of the natural science and what we mean by that, it really does seem to be founded in a willingness to be antagonistic, to challenge things, experiments, things like this. I guess for the show, what I'm interested in and how I think that we can wrap this back around, ultimately about faith and science, is what can we know about the history of science and how it came about that helps us get a better understanding about science so that we can understand that when there's an antagonism between faith and science, it's not bad, it's something naturally what science does, if that makes sense. Yeah,
the question of what science is, how to define it, how to even have the proper attitude toward it is a central concern to my field as a philosopher of science, also as a historian of science. There's a debate, and we actually have a name for this issue. The issue is the question of scientific realism. Should we take the entities and theories that are postulated by science to be real things? Should we assume that the world, assume is too strong a word, should we understand our scientific theories to be telling something to us about the way the world really is? Specifically, let's just think about our best established scientific theories. Is the world really the way it is described by those theories? So the debate goes something like this. On the one hand, you might instinctively say, yes, obviously the world is really the way it is described by our best established scientific theories. Science works, to your point about technology. It makes good predictions. We're able to engineer these awesome devices, these special snowflake microphones, I guess.
We keep hearing about it in the science journals. Yes.
Someone needs to work on Skype, though.
Yeah.
And so there seems to be this very obvious argument. There's a famous philosopher who actually gave it a name, Hilary Putnam, if any philosophy nerds are listening.
Thank you, nerds.
The no miracles argument. The idea here is that realism is the only philosophy that doesn't make the success of science a miracle. Okay, so the idea here is that were science not telling us something real about the world, it would be a miracle that it works.
Right.
Okay, so that seems like a very, very powerful intuition, one that we have to nod at, one that we have to acknowledge. The best explanation for the success of science seems to be that our best established theories are in fact true.
Right.
But it gets a little messy when you think about this. On further examination, most philosophers, I don't know if that's a little bit too much to say, but I guess my beat on the field is that most philosophers are hesitant to give an unqualified yes to that assertion, right? And the major reason here is, like you mentioned, history. Across history, we see a succession of overturned theories. A theory is accepted for a period of time and then overturned. We had theories of phlogiston. We had theories of ether.
Wait, ether's gone? No. I got to get rid of my ether shirts.
I know. But even really, really major and incredibly successful theories, Newton's theory of gravity, one of the most highly successful theories in all of history, is not technically something that we can call unqualifiedly true. You know, Einstein completely revolutionized our thinking about gravity early in the 20th century. And so there's a sense in which Newtonian physics, Newtonian gravity in particular, is just false. And if we take a sober look at this history, it gives us good reason to then distrust our current theories. You know, if we felt so firmly that Newtonian physics was right, how can we tell if we're not in the same situation right now with our current theories? What if they're overturned in the next revolutionary theoretical move?
Right.
Now, that argument also has a fancy name. We call it the pessimistic meta-induction. Like
that should be a microphone name.
So the idea there is that you look at the history of science, you think about it like a data set, and you say, okay, let's generalize over all past theories that have been overturned, and then we basically take that to be a pessimistic message that the current theories are going to be overturned as well. We can't expect them to describe reality if up to now we've always just discovered that our past theories are wrong.
Let me say, one way that I like to think about this in a very practical term, this will sound adjacent, but I think you'll agree. So, for instance, 2 weekends ago, we were in Oklahoma City, and we went to the Oklahoma Science Museum, which is cool. My kids always love dorking out at these places. But inevitably, you go up to somewhere, and there's, a big representation of, an electron. Right? Blown up really big. And you go and here's this part of the electron, and here's this part of the electron. And I remember myself being sort of these nerds who liked reading encyclopedias, was so electrons are like these little balls that have spinny things. And then one day I was told we've never actually seen one.
Yeah.
And I'm all wait. Because you think, what an electron is just we've blown up a picture of an electron and shown it. But no, we only have models of it because we have never seen it. Same thing with DNA and all these things. And so I know that people might go well, these just sound like two rival philosophical, but no, actually a lot of the way you learn science is not like the bald-faced world, which sometimes science is portrayed to be.
I love that you brought this up because, so the question about what to do with this pessimism over history is a hard question. And I think thinking about it in terms of a concrete example is important. So I was kind of thinking about bringing up electrons myself. We don't want to actually say that electrons don't exist, right? That's going a little too far. That seems crazy. At the very least, we certainly don't want to throw away all the things that we think we know about electrons. But at the same time, we do have some reason for worrying about them in this literal sense. And the way you put it, I think, is really good. Think about the way that you learned about electrons as a child, right? You're sitting in your elementary school classroom, and you're taught about this little ball particle thing that orbits a nucleus, right? Later on, as you get a little more sophisticated, maybe in high school, you're taught the electron cloud model, so that there's some kind of weird, big whirly cloud surrounding the nucleus. And later on in your education, for those who get exposed to it, you get introduced to quantum mechanics, in which you realize and you learn that there are some pretty serious empirical and observational reasons to doubt that electrons even have a specific discrete location. So you progressively have to back off of your childhood image, right? You have to revise the way gradually that you conceive of electrons. They're certainly not that round, hard particle that you picture as a child. So it's like we started out with this clear picture, and we slowly began to take away all of those original assertions that we made, and it leaves us wondering, what do we really know about this thing that we call an electron after all? Even I have to admit that despite knowing a few things about quantum mechanics and having thought about it philosophically for some time, I still do retreat in my mental image to like this little hard ball, right? It's hard not to do that. That's what I return to when questions are asked about, is an electron real? Does it really exist? I'm thinking of this little tiny hard ball that's supposed to be like spinning around. But that's also the very thing that I know with most certainty not to be real or accurate, right? It's not at all consistent with the scientific evidence about whatever it is that we do call electrons. It's all related to something that my husband likes to say. He's a professor of chemistry. And when he teaches chemistry, particularly at these upper level classes, he has this little evil delight, actually, I'd say, in saying to his students, everything you have learned up until this point is a lie. His idea is that he thinks it's really helpful and important for them in their intellectual development to start to pull back the layers of what they have previously learned, modify those original views, qualify them, so that you can kind of get rid of some of that stuff that you had in your mind from your elementary school science. When you reach the upper levels, and especially when you do research, you have to undo and rethink a lot of that stuff that you're walking into the game with.
So, Karen, I'll be honest, you've blown my mind on a number of different levels while you're talking. So I'm having trouble formulating the question I want to ask, but it's kind of bringing two ideas together. And the first one is, I think in these sort of popular Catholic apologetics, I sometimes hear, and I think this might be simplistic, that it makes sense that scientific discovery really took off in Western culture because it was a culture that had a sense that there was a good God who had created the world, and therefore the minds that he gave us corresponded to the world that's out there. In a sense, there was this correspondence theory of truth. We could trust our God-given mental faculties to give us true knowledge about the world. But then I was listening to you talk, and I'm probably going to mischaracterize what you were saying. It kind of sounded like we have these models that map onto the world but don't map on completely or only describe part of it.
Don't exhaust it.
I mean, how do we kind of, I don't know, I guess there's a part of me that's longing for sort of a bedrock that I can rest on, that I can rest my knowledge on. And it just sounds like you're always kind of you're exploring new ways of understanding the world and have to leave behind these old ways.
The question that you are asking is one that scares me. Yeah. And I'll say that because I know that I'm treading into dangerous waters here. I personally, my research and even my spiritual reflection is heading in a direction lately where the mystery of human knowledge is so salient to me. And I'm not entirely sure what to do. I know that I'm not, there are many people who don't agree with me, both on the philosophical level, but even, some just recently I got into a little bit of a debate with a Catholic scientist about whether or not our minds are adequate to this world, whether there is a correspondence between the facilities of our mind and the world. And I'd have to say that I lean in the no direction there. And I know that there are some very important Catholic thinkers who would lean yes.
Yeah.
But to me, it seems very helpful to acknowledge the ways in which even our natural knowledge does not quite get at what the world is, exhaust what the world is, and that maybe some kind of continuity of mystery across different realms of our knowledge is important.
Well, so we're coming up on the break, so I'm going to solve everything real quick.
Okay.
You know, right.
There we go.
We just got done with mystery. I'm like, I got it. No. I actually think, and I think this goes into what we want to talk about when we get back from the break. The question is what we mean by adequate, and we have supercharged the word adequate. I think this goes back to the very first examples. Adequation to us means like obvious, full up, the cup to the brim. It seems to me that if you look at someone like Thomas Aquinas saying things like the intellect has infinity as its possibility, I think some people hear that and go like, yeah, sure, so it's good to go. But I think he's saying like, because the mystery's obvious, right? Like Thomas is actually trying to throw out that it's completely possible you will never end learning, and that like this idea that there's like a puzzle piece in your head waiting to find a puzzle piece out in the world is not what he was saying. I certainly know Aristotle didn't think that was the case either. There's ideas he has about natural kinds and everything like this, but there wasn't this idea of your brain is just waiting to make the connection out there. No, your brain has the possibility to do all, or your soul, I should say, for them, but has these possibilities, but that means that the mystery really can go your entire life and then be passed on as a torch to the next person. And so when I hear Thomas say that truth is the mind's adequation to its object, he means that we can just keep getting more adequate to it. Not that we would ever get to that. Like, so, you know, adequate is not like a light switch. It's not something we flip on and off. It's something we're approaching. And so for me, when you hear this mystery stuff, I actually am really, I don't know if relieve's the right word, but I'm excited because that means that, like, I will never exhaust learning what I can, not even in my own life, and then I'll get to pass that on to the next group. And to me, that is actually a wonderful way to start thinking about traditions, actually. Traditions aren't like we have the answers and we pass them on. Traditions are we brought this baton as far as we can and we pass it on to the next group in humility, knowing that there's more to learn. So when we get back from the break, I think that there's all sorts of directions we can go with that. But I'm with Bud. You've shot down electrons, so I'm going to go home and tear down my electron poster. And, no, I'm kidding. No, this is great. Like I said, this is the Uncommon Good. We'll be back speaking about these things. Dr. Karen Zwier, Bud, and I, stick around. We'll be back after these messages. Well, Bud, if people want to go on and, like, defend electrons, I suppose, wouldn't that be great if that's what Tony Calumet gets the most heat about on our shows? He's like, I love electrons! What are these hippies doing about the electrons?
It's like when you break to your kids the mythology of Santa Claus.
That's
For
right.
our listeners, it's electrons and ether.
No, ether. I thought they were round balls. Well, if you want to complain, Facebook, Iowa Catholic Radio, Twitter, @iacatholicradio.com. We have the Zip Whip line, 515-223-1150. And then, if you want to know if we get fired over electrons, you should sign up for the bi-weekly e-newsletter, In Tune, mailed every other Wednesday. Complete, easy-to-navigate source for station headlines, events, firings. Only 2 emails a month. Don't bombard you with inbox. So, yeah. So you're okay, people. Your electron is not like a basketball. Stick around and you'll learn what else is not like a basketball. A basketball. Back with the Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. We have with us Dr. Karen Zwier, Ph.D. from University of Pittsburgh, History and Philosophy of Science. Held appointments at Drake and ISU. Dislikes electrons, we've established.
Enemy of electrons everywhere.
Yeah. No, so we've been having a fantastic, as Bud has said, mind-blowing talk about realism and anti-realism in science. What we want to point out is, and we always try to do this show, we always like throwing the listeners into the deep end a bit, but we're always here with floaties. We're throwing floaties at you. And so the question starts to be, okay, this is a Catholic station. Why are you throwing us into scientific debates? Well, part of it, right, is if we're going to talk about this idea that science is firm and faith is fluffy fairy tale land, we already have to, call into question one of those ideas, which is science is not this firmness. Now, the trick is, right, you think, oh, okay, well, if we establish that, maybe that will make people more comfortable with faith and science. But usually what happens is when you start undermining this sort of rock-solid concrete idea of science, well, now they go back and go, well, can we trust anything? In philosophy, there's two terms, and we've brought them up before in the show, but one, it's the cataphatic and the apophatic. That's nifty ways to say the via positiva and the via negativa, the positive way and the negative way. Karen, for you think that this is actually starting to be like a theme in your life through a lot of things, but specifically how we navigate difficulties in science and then connect that back to our faith.
Yeah, this is somewhat speculative for me, and this is kind of like a big spoiler alert for my future work. I'm headed in this direction of thinking where it seems to me like there are huge analogies, parallels between this question of scientific realism that I've just been discussing and questions of theology. In theology, those terms that we have, the via positiva and the via negativa, it seems to me like that's very helpful when I turn that back on the question of scientific realism. And, we know that God is beyond our language and our knowing, and that each time we make an assertion, what God is surpasses what we can possibly mean using our minds and our language. And that sounds familiar to me from the things that I've just been saying about electrons, right? What an electron is, even. It's not anywhere, we would think it's not anywhere near as mysterious or other as God. And yet there's something similar going on where we have this strange apophatic stance.
And just to interject real quick, I'm sorry. So if people are interested in this, there's someone really difficult to read in theology you can read. His name is Denis the Areopagite, or Dionysius, or Pseudo-Dionysius. The point being is, what I want to bring this up for Catholics so this doesn't sound too esoteric, other than Aristotle and Augustine, in the top 5 of people that Thomas Aquinas mentions, this Denis guy is way up there, and especially his talk about all truth about God surpassing our language.
Yes.
So this is not like hippie, crazy fringe stuff. If you are yourself, like what you would consider yourself a run-of-the-mill Catholic who bows his hat to Thomas Aquinas, he buys this argument in spades. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I just want to establish that for people.
Yeah, this is a long tradition. It's very prominent in the early church fathers. It's particularly prominent in the theology and spirituality of our Eastern brothers and sisters, right? To emphasize that our positive assertions about God have to always be qualified. If God is other, if God is completely other, that's kind of a line from Augustine in the Confessions, right? We need to acknowledge that he's mysterious to us, and that there's a sense in which our negative assertions about God are more true than our positive assertions.
Exactly.
Right? God is unlike anything else that we're familiar with. So when we say even something as simple as God exists, we have to say that his existence is unlike anything else that we're familiar with. When we affirm that God is transcendent, this is a famous example from Dionysius. When we affirm that God's transcendent, we have to immediately qualify that and also affirm that he's immanent. And so the conjunction of those two has this really strange and a mysterious tension, right? Mm-hmm. How do you say that something is both transcendent and immanent? We know not, right? So all of this is to say, to kind of get back to what the connection is to scientific realism, this idea that I'm playing with lately is that what it is to know scientifically and what it is to know theologically may be more alike than we tend to think. Both realms have these positive assertions. Both realms also involve very important qualifications to those assertions. And so there's this feel of mystery in both. And might that not be helpful to us in seeing our knowledge as a united thing, not as something that is fundamentally in conflict?
Yeah, Karen, when I think about cashing out some of this conversation, like for me, what comes to mind is how do I talk to my students about these matters in ways that are helpful? And I'll be honest, like the scientific side of things, that doesn't come easy or natural for me. But I know in listening to you and listening to others that there's helpful and less helpful ways to think about, I guess you'd say, the relationship between the two. And so I'm hearing from you like the study of the natural world can foster in us a sense of awe, a sense of mystery, hopefully a humility. We also want to be careful about not, I don't know, like I don't want to open up a Pandora's box, but like intelligent design discussions, and just too simplistically moving from like, well, the world has this intelligibility or apparent design, therefore there is a creator. I'm a big admirer of the thought of Joseph Ratzinger. In his Regensburg address, he talks about how theology can be used to purify other modes of reasoning. And what he seems to have in mind is he says, like, the reason why science grabs so many people's attention or why we hold it in such high esteem is that it limits its field of inquiry and therefore possesses this real power. But there's elements of life that exist beyond it. Like, if we're going to talk about goodness, beauty, and truth, we do have to draw upon the great philosophical traditions. Do you think the way that Ratzinger talks about things there, and I know I gave kind of like the layman's version, is that one way we can begin to talk with students about like having faith and studying the natural world?
Good. I have to say I'm not familiar with what you're referring to in Ratzinger. What I can pick up on what you mentioned earlier about the intelligent design movement is that, I do think that's a wrong-headed way to think about the interaction of science and theology, because theology shouldn't just step in at any moment that science finds mystery and says, we can't figure this out. Okay, it must be God. That's called God of the gaps thinking. And I think it's very, very damaging to a unified theory of knowledge, right, for Catholics, for Christians to have. So we want to talk about something different. I don't want to at all advertise a kind of sense of mystery that says, then, God's going to be the explanation for all this stuff that's mysterious. I rather want to emphasize that this is about mystery to us, right? This is something about what it is to be human knowers moving through the world, and that there are certain things that just are very seemingly paradoxical and mysterious to us because of our own, humble limitations. That does not mean that God is coming in and filling up all the gaps in nature. Instead, it means that what it is for us to contemplate nature is somehow analogous to what it is to contemplate God. And we need not vex ourselves, at least maybe not quite as much as we do, about these things that we think we know from science coming into conflict with things that we think we know from theology.
Yeah. No, I see. One of the things that I think is interesting about this, I'm a big advocate of via negativa. I love pointing out everywhere that I can that mostly what we do is rule things out. Thomas Aquinas, in his discourse on the teacher, he says, look, either what we do is we demonstrate what's already really in their souls anyway, or it's like medicine where we remove error. Like, we're not really putting things in people's heads. We're drawing them out. We're removing things that are wrong. And, we know more what God is not than what he is. Well, this goes all the way back to me with Socrates, who you'll get students who will be like, man, Socrates is so arrogant. And I go, why do you think he's arrogant? Well, he thinks he knows everything. I'm like, funny enough, tell me one thing he actually forcefully says he knows. Silence. And I'm like, the only answer is he knows he's a fool. I was like, so it's weird, right? Socrates is annoying. I'll give you that. I've prayed my whole life to be an annoying philosopher. He's annoying because he's making you rule out things you don't want to rule out. But arrogant's the wrong word because the man doesn't really teach anything. And funny enough, that to me is human life and a lot of things. I think people are really uncomfortable with it, but I don't think they understand, and this is what I'm picking up from you, the freeing power of this. When we talk about the mystic nature of this, it doesn't have to be like esoteric or like, a late 60s Beatle album or something like this. We're just saying that there's a great relief almost where we can say, like, it's not our job to definitively decide everything that's the case. We've done our job if we've ruled things out and helped pass the baton that much further. And I think this starts to be interesting, right? Because then, like, Newton's theory is not absolutely worthless wrong. It's right in a sense. And it's even more right when we think about what it set up. And, like, the fact that it was able... Because if he never came up with that, we would have never overcame it with the next step. And so you don't have to go look at the vast swath of human history and go, wrong, wrong, wrong. It's not that the pessimistic theory is completely wrong itself. It's that it's sort of like can lead to wallowing in the pessimism, when actually there's a lot of really great progress made by being wrong in a good way. And I think maybe that's what I'm hearing from you is let's encourage each other to be wrong in helpful ways, because by ruling things out, we get that much closer to this great mystery.
I like what you said a little earlier about comfort and discomfort. I personally experienced that very powerfully. And, here I'll kind of air my intellectual garbage out in the air, literally on the airwaves, the radio waves. I feel much more comfortable making these assertions about this stance of mystery, this apophatic stance, spiritually. I'm at a place where it's very beautiful and comforting to me to have this intellectual humility where I just say, this stuff is hard. This stuff, I just don't know what to say. It's mysterious. I'm less comfortable, I'll admit this, professionally, where it's my business to try to make assertions, where it's my business to talk about, good theories of knowledge and come up with, positive assertions about what it is that we know and how we know it. There, it's much less comfortable to say that perhaps our proper stance towards science is one of mystery. That's not going to be a popular thing to sell to most people. So, I'm speaking from a place where I'm not 100% confident isn't the right word. I'm not 100% comfortable with this myself, right? It's something that I'm working through. But intellectual humility is a wonderful and comforting place to which I run, particularly when I'm in the midst of uncomfortable work.
Well, okay, so sorry for interrupting you, bud. If you just know the history of science, though, like, they have to come to grips with, and this is me genuinely airing a question that gets, a lot of scientific discoveries, like, just frankly error, or just accident, like sheer, they got lucky. And anybody who wants to really, like, lean into the sort of, like, really confident, like, we're making this progress, I'm just like, no, half the time people were literally searching for something else and accidentally discovered the discovery. Doesn't that, you would think that just the history of science itself would implant deep seeds of, like, mystery, if not providence, at least serendipity. They need more of you is what we're getting at, right? Like, they need to listen to the history of science people
You
more.
can't confront history and continue to have an uncomplicated understanding of anything. The history of anything, really. Even the history of Christianity gets really complicated, right? So, yes, a close look at the history of science does call into question all sorts of things about, what discoveries were just happenstance. What can we call them? I think it does advise us to a lot of intellectual humility, but it's really, really easy to forget that. And again, this no miracles argument comes back. It's very powerful, right? We're sitting here talking on microphones, broadcasting radio waves. We have these little phones that we tinker with.
But we don't know how lift works on planes. There's a whole argument about, like, people are not dead sure why lift works on airplanes.
Oh, don't exacerbate my phobias.
Well, I'm a little worried about that statement because I think we have some pretty good models for how and why lift works. Okay, you did hear my word model.
That's
there.
right. Yeah,
you did hear it, but I wouldn't. I guess I don't consider that a particularly mysterious thing about the pressures involved on a wing.
My only point, I guess, to say is we were flying well before we were down the road into, like,
where
we're at. Yes,
okay,
yes.
yeah, okay, that's good. So the point is, things can work before we understand them.
Yes.
And might it be that we will never reach full understanding? So that something works is not an inevitable direction toward the conclusion that we understand it.
Right. All right, Bud, sorry. I'm sorry for making you more afraid to fly in planes, so go ahead.
No, I have a really huge question that probably I'm sort of infamous for the last minute question, but it sounds to me like I've heard different philosophers of science talk about a unified theory of knowledge or truth. It sounds like that might be like a search for the fountain of youth, sort of just like this more of a hope for human beings than something that we'd ever actually come to.
Yeah, this is a very, very huge topic, and it's a tough one to approach, especially in a few minutes. I don't even know if I could spend an hour to do it justice. But yes, I mean, I'll just say simply that I have a very strong skepticism about these unified theories of knowledge, or these unified theories of physics. And part of the reason has to do with this intellectual humility, the sense that our theories are but models. And, I think, again, my retreat here, my inclination is to just prefer this way of thinking about knowledge such that there is a strong unity to our knowledge across different contexts, across different realms. So might it not be that my knowledge has a similar character when I'm thinking about the natural world and when I'm thinking about God? Might it not be that when I feel uncertainty, when I feel humility before the mysteries of God, I also might have something similar going on in the natural world too? To me, that's very comforting,
Yes.
that thought.
Oh, yeah. No, no, I don't know how many times that, to get across a theological point with someone, I've had to just be the Mino that goes you actually don't know what you think you know about something in the scientific world. And they're like, oh, no, we have all these things figured out. And I'm like, basically every scientific journal in physics is basically ruling out the last 8 great stabs at this. I think about how much money has been spent trying to prove string theory. And then the last 2 years has been nope, dead end. And that's not what we want, right? And you start to see this longing. I think you pointed this out about comfort and discomfort. So I'll go more poetic. A longing in people for that stability. They want to go somewhere where someone can look them in the eye, and I think you and I agree, lie to their face and say, if you do blank, you will never have a doubt again. All things will be solved, no questions asked. In the faith, I think we go, look, two people, it's usually split in two, right? Either people have rock solid faith and will is hard. I've never had very many doubts about God, but whether I should eat that third cheeseburger has always been much tougher for me. Other people, willpower is easy enough to do, but they're riddled by doubts. They're always thinking about these things. They look at the faith life and they start to actually learn that that's constituent of the faith life, and they go, I don't want to do this then. And so then they go looking. This is funny, right? This is the exact opposite of the stereotype. They go looking for dogmatic comfort in science, which is just a caricature of what it actually is. Because that's not what it is. But there's something profoundly human in both fields to go, I will not exhaust, it is impossible for me to exhaust the knowledge that God and his natural world provides.
Yeah, I personally find great comfort in this because I am that type that has a lot of doubts. And it's been an intellectual journey for me to come to a place where intellectual humility and mystery is actually comforting, because I just say, normatively, it is okay to sit in this place of doubt and of mystery. So being of that sort of person, being that sort of person that has a lot of intellectual angst, I've found this refuge in mystery.
Well, I think it's been fantastic. I know we've swung a very huge arc in the show talking about all sorts of things, but I can't tell you how wonderful it's been to have you on the show to talk about these things.
Thank
and we're
you.
going to have to you have to be an all-star for the show and come back more, because this is some
I'd
great
love that.
stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Dr. Karen Zwier. Like we said, PhD, University of Pittsburgh, History and Philosophy of Science, holds appointments from Drake, ISU. We're going to try to get her to be around doing more Iowa Catholic radio stuff. She just doesn't know it. So. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
So, Bud, I'm sorry that I mean, I know you're literally getting to fly again soon, so I hope you don't, cancel flights and take up trains or something like that.
No, that was great. In all seriousness, I just want to enroll in one of Karen's classes now. For me, that was, I don't know, it was sort of outside of my wheelhouse, but I was just like jotting down notes here in the office. So,
well, I want to take one of her classes,
great.
but not do the work. I realize, I always get on to those students, but let's be honest. But I just told everybody willpower's the problem, so I'll go listen to your class, but no homework.
You're happy to have like midterms and research papers behind you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but there's all sorts of stuff we want to talk about. We want to take a special moment. Everybody knows about the floods that happened here in the Des Moines metro, and we lost one of our own, Larry Kotler. He passed away. So let me read something. Our hearts go out to Larry's family and friends, especially the thousands of Bulldogs fans. He did stuff for Drake, also for Dowling in the Des Moines area who've come to know Larry as the voice of their hometown team. I know that there's just so much that we want to talk about. There's so many people who dealt with all of these floods and everything like that, and we want to make sure to be out there for people. And, our prayers go out to Larry, his soul, his family, but everybody out there who dealt with the difficulties of the floods. Our heartfelt prayers go out to all of you. And, what makes Des Moines great is how willing people are to help each other, especially people they barely know. So we want to remember all those people in our prayers.
Yeah, I was watching the news from afar, but just seeing the images on Facebook and different news outlets, I'm certainly praying for all of our listeners as well.
So, like always with Iowa Catholic Radio, we have so much that you can go check out at iowacatholicradio.com or on Facebook. We're running a little long, so I'll leave that to you there. But what are some of the things that they can be a part of our ministry by listening to the radio station?
I might encourage you to take advantage of the various program that we have that's built around prayer. 5:30 a.m. you can pray the Rosary. That transitions right into the Angelus. At 3 p.m. there's Divine Mercy Chaplet. So various ways to use Iowa Catholic Radio to strengthen your prayer life.
And remember, to be a part of our ministry, you don't have to be on the air. By donating, you can extend our ministries to others. This is The Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner for Dr. Bud Moir. May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in your hearts and our families, our city, our state, our nation, the entire world, the cosmos. This is The Uncommon Good. We will talk to you next week.
The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr is heard every week on wonderful Catholic stations like this one, and anytime on podcast. Just search for The Uncommon Good.